If you're on YouTube right now, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes. And drop a like and a comment. Thank you. Mr. John Bruscato, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
That's good enough. Yeah.
Close enough?
Yeah.
Man, thanks for coming in, and been looking forward to having this conversation with you. So let's jump into it. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me, did you grow up in the Monroe area?
So I was actually born in Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Okay.
My dad is retired Army, and he was in the armor. He was like an armor or tanker. Or I don't know exactly what you call it, but he was a tank commander.
Okay.
And he did that for 22, almost 23 years. And my father's family is from Monroe. And his last post was the professor of military science at Northeast or ULM or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
At the time it was Northeast.
Right.
But that was his last job, and so he took that job to come home, and ever since then he's been running Geno's Italian restaurant.
So did your family start that restaurant, or was it already up and running? Y'all kind of took it over?
So my grandfather, his name was John Bruscato, and he started that restaurant with my grandmother in 1964.
Wow.
And I think my dad was 15 years old at the time.
Wow. How old were you when y'all moved back to town?
I was 5.
5 years old. So really the restaurant's pretty much all you know at that point, right? As far as it's been in your family. Did you grow up in the restaurant? I mean, because I know talking to people who run restaurants that it's got to be a family affair if you want it to be profitable.
So I did. I grew up, I would say I was raised by my parents and the customers of Geno's restaurant.
Okay. And it's still in full swing to this day. And I'll tell you that this time of the year, my broker, John Ray, will go there and we'll get jars of spaghetti sauce, just a whole packet that he gets from Geno's that he gives out to some of his friends and then all of us agents. And my wife looks forward to that every year around Christmas. I'm not a big spaghetti person, but she is, and it's definitely a treat every time.
So John and his entire family have been huge customers of Geno's, for like 60 years. I want to say that John and his wife might have gotten engaged at Geno's.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
I'm going to find out later today if that was. I'm asking.
Yeah, I tell you, if you want to text him right now, we'll probably know pretty quick. But, I'm pretty sure they got engaged at Geno's.
So although the food at your restaurant is not, I've never been a pasta person, but my wife loves it, and we go there occasionally for her. And you want to talk about how cool it is to see something that has lasted so long, and just the culture and the history that's within that building. It's unbelievable. I mean, we don't have many places like that around town anymore. The only other one I can really think of is going to be the Mohawk, which they're right there together. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a true treasure for our community. So with growing up with a retired military father, talk to us about kind of how that was. I mean, was life pretty strict back in those days, or?
Well, I mean, I got a lot of freedoms, but there were also a lot of consequences to poor decisions.
I can imagine.
So I mean, he wasn't like a overbearing or
sure, but
definitely when it came time for there to be some consequences, I think he did a good job of making sure that I. And I'm sure that
boy growing up, there was always boundaries being tested. So let's advance. Where did you go to high school at?
St. Frederick's.
St. Frederick's High School. You graduate at St. Frederick's. When did law come into the play? I mean, do you have a lot of family that's in law right now, or?
So I have my father's first cousin, Tony Bruscato, is a lawyer, and
is he local?
He's local. His office is on Hudson Lane in Monroe, and but how did I come into law? I was in college before I knew anything about the idea of going to law school. And I'll tell you a little bit about how.
Absolutely.
So whenever I was in college, I started college and I thought to myself, I had some other relatives that had started college and not been success, or I don't want to say weren't successful, but they didn't follow through with college.
It wasn't for them.
They just dropped out. They didn't pursue it, or they had they had the same basic fundamental background as I did, and then they get to college and they're like, I don't know, I'll do general studies, or I'll do this or that or whatever, and then they end up saying, you know what, I'm going to take a semester off, and then they didn't go back.
Right.
And so I had TOPS, and I figured I had one shot. I said, I'm either going to go all the way through, or if I drop out, I'm going to have to, I'm going to be in trouble. It's going to be difficult to go back. So, so I said to myself whenever I entered college, I said, I'm going to pick a major. And I tell a lot of people going into college this to this day. I said, I'm going to pick a major. I'm going to, no matter what, I'm going to finish in this subject, no matter what happens. If I hate it, I'm still going to finish it. If I love it, I'm going to finish it. If I find something else I like more, I'm still going to finish.
So you wanted to be determined on your path.
I wanted to not deviate from that path, and I didn't. And that subject was business marketing. So I have a marketing degree. And interesting enough, when I was taking my marketing classes, I actually really didn't. I mean, I'm just not I know a lot about marketing from that experience and from just being in business. And marketing isn't advertising.
Right.
Advertising is just a small little
piece of
marketing. I mean, marketing is like everything from, if you're a restaurant, what kind of countertops you have at your checkout,
yep,
or what kind of tables you have, or what kind of chairs you have, or what's the process for the customer. Like, they come in through the front door, they are greeted by somebody, and then they select their menu choices or whatever. I mean, marketing is really an all-encompassing thing, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point during my studies, I really kind of was bored with it. And not that it's not an important area of study, but I did kind of get a little bored with marketing. And I took an economics course as a part of my prerequisites. And man, I was like, it just lit me up, man. I was just like, holy smokes, this is I need to know how to think this way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was it was a beginning micro analysis, which is like a 202, or it might be 2002 or something.
What drew you to it? So once you got involved in it, and you had that wow moment that, this is something here. Can you pinpoint one thing that just really excited you about it?
It made me think, when I studied it, it made me think that I would be able to conduct business with the knowledge that I learned in those courses. And it's a lot, especially with the microanalysis, it's a lot about supply and demand and price.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how do you determine, if you're going to sell something, how do you determine what the price should be?
Right.
And that subject matter made me feel like I would be able to determine the price I should sell things at. And I just, that plus it turned me on intellectually. I understood it. It wasn't confusing. And then I looked around at my peers, and they were all confused and had a hard time,
That also leads to the fact that you probably have a big entrepreneurial spirit about you. Did some of that come into play? Have you ever thought about, at that point, opening your own business one day?
I mean, I've always wanted what I think everybody wants on some level, which is total freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've always wanted to have.
But is owning a business total freedom?
Well, it is in small.
Yeah.
But there's total freedom, but there's also consequences.
Absolutely. The consequences of that total freedom are very big consequences, Would you agree with that?
Well, I would say that you just got to know that the consequences are always coming.
Yeah.
And you can make a choice that's going to advance your business, potentially, or you can make a choice that's going to not advance your business.
I hear real estate agents talk about wanting to get in the business because you got so much freedom to be able to come and do what you want, but freedom comes at a price. If you're not out there working, trying to get the business for down the road, that down the road never comes. So you got all this freedom, but you have nothing to support the freedom at that point.
Yeah, I mean, like, freedom doesn't mean lazy.
Yeah.
I guess what I wanted was to be able to cut my own path in whichever direction I wanted to travel.
Awesome.
So that was, how I looked at it, I guess, at the time.
So econ really kind of took you off intellectually. You're still in school. So did you end up enhancing the classes in economics that you started taking?
So, and I'll tell you, I want to say shout out to Professor Paul Nelson. I think he lives in West Monroe right now. But he's retired, but his class, it made me totally go all in. And so I ended up adding economics as a major.
Okay.
In addition to marketing.
Okay. Cause you're not going to leave that path.
Because I was not going to leave that path.
So adding, on a second major, what did that do to your workload?
So, in between the, so kind of this is going back to how did we get to law? So in between my first year, my second year, and my third year, I took an Army ROTC called Leadership Training Course in Fort Knox, Kentucky, and it was either a 4 or 6 week course. I can't remember. There's no commitment. Anybody can do it if you're a sophomore in college.
Okay.
And it's essentially designed to be like a jump start so you don't have to do the first 2 years of ROTC. Okay. And my dad being retired Army, and I was wanting to move out. I lived with my dad all through college. I lived at home with my dad for 4.5 years while I was in college, which had its positives and negatives. And I was trying to find a path to move out that was financially not stupid.
Right.
Because to me, it was stupid to waste money on rent, to spend money on rent or whatever at that time when I didn't really have a strong income.
Right.
And so I was thinking about joining the Army because part of the deal was you get an apartment while you're in college. And so I was looking at that and I'm thinking, hey, this could work. I'll be able to get out of the house, and get some more independence, and go into the Army. And like my dad, following my dad's footsteps. And so my dad told me about this course. He knew about the course. He's like, you should absolutely do this course. 100%. Go do this course. This course is going to be phenomenal for you. You're going to have like an experience that people would pay for. Like, this is such a high level experience. Like, people would pay a lot of money for this. He said, you should go do it. And actually they pay you to do it.
Okay.
Like that. I don't remember how much it was, but it's like 800. I got like $800 or something like that for I think it was 4 weeks that I was there. And, so I got to do this course, and it was quite an experience, and I did well in it, and it was challenging. A lot of people yell at you. I remember the one of the drill sergeants called me, "Who do you think you are, Elvis Presley? You need to go cut those sideburns." Like doing tons of push-ups and tons of like running and physical activities, mm-hmm. and shooting, land nav, like you learn how to use like old school map and compass, and it was I'm glad that I did it, but whenever I came home, I got into a little bit of trouble. I got arrested, and so that was kind of how I got exposed to what lawyers are and and what that, what that profession, like that was my first, I guess, contact with that profession.
So you kind of got to shadow the profession, but not in the most advisable way.
That's right.
Gotcha. So tell me a little bit about that experience,
So,
or as much as you want to talk about that experience.
well, no, and like I don't mind. I mean, this isn't like a secret or anything. I was hammered drinking with friends one night, and I don't smoke, but I had a cigarette, and none of this is advisable.
Kids being kids.
Yeah, I don't know
They
what
shouldn't be doing what
I don't know
kids
what
are
the
doing.
age of your audience is, but
Yeah.
children don't try this at home.
Most definitely. Adults don't try probably some of this at home.
But so I had a cigarette, and I was looking for a lighter. I didn't have a lighter, and I was at ULM, and I was at a friend's dorm room, and I thought, well, maybe I'll find a lighter in one of the cars that are in the parking lot. Like, I wasn't looking to steal anything,
Right.
except maybe a little butane from somebody's lighter, and which was still, technically theft, and I should not have done any of this. And so I'm looking for a lighter, and I don't find one, but a police officer finds me, and so I got arrested for it's actually a felony for simple burglary, and that was horrible experience. Absolutely.
How was it? Tell me about that experience of having to call your dad.
Yeah, it was horrible. Your dad, that's a lieutenant colonel, retired, and also, basically in charge of me at that point.
I mean, that was probably the one thing that kept me straight, was knowing that I would have to answer to my dad. And it's not that I was afraid of, a beating. I didn't have a life like that, but it was just the fact of the disappointment that would have had to have. So my wife at sometimes will tell me, "Don't make me call your dad." And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am." So that was really kind of my one thing. Not to say I don't want to disappoint my mom, but I never wanted to have to make that call to my dad and say, "Hey, I'm in trouble."
Well, I got the opportunity to do that, and it was a very humbling experience, and it it set me on a path to my cousin Tony represented me. Thankfully, he did an excellent job. It was, the district attorney's office essentially. The district attorney chewed me out really, really strongly and said that I would go to Angola and all kinds of horrible things would happen to me. And that was an experience all by itself.
Sure.
And then, I was told if I screwed up again, that this was all going to come back. And so I didn't screw up again.
Your one free pass.
This is your one free pass. And I took that to heart. But in the process of that, I got exposure to other lawyers. And I heard about cases that they had worked on together and separately. And I got to hear stories about helping people, and representing clients that, that are really oftentimes at the worst point in their life,
Right.
due to a particular circumstance.
Sure.
And that was interesting to me. And so, and being around my cousin Tony, it really led me to decide to go to law school.
So where were you at in your college path that you got arrested? Were you a sophomore?
It was right after I was going into my junior year.
Okay. So you still had about 2 more years to kind of contemplate those next steps. So at what point in that process of that 2 years did you make the decision that when I graduate, I'm going to law school?
So I decided that I was going to take the LSAT and see, because you have to take the LSAT to get into law school. And the first time I took the LSAT, I did not do well on the LSAT. And so I knew I had to take it again. And so if I wanted to really get into a law school. And so I decided, I think really not doing well on the LSAT cemented the idea that I was definitely going to do this, because at that point I found a prep course and I did the prep course and I did much better on the LSAT and I got into law school. So,
Where'd you end up going to law school at?
Mississippi College.
Okay. How long were you away at law school for? How long did that process
It's a
take?
3-year.
So 3-year process. So you're living on campus at that point?
So Mississippi College, main university, the college is in Clinton, Mississippi, but the law school itself is in downtown Jackson, Mississippi.
Okay.
So, and there's no like on campus living or anything. So I lived in a little apartment complex in the Bellhaven neighborhood for all 3 years, the same apartment for all 3 years.
Now, did you have to work during this time as well?
It would be pretty. I don't want to say it would be impossible, but
Very difficult.
It would be extremely difficult without some sort of special circumstance.
So just the workload's just so intense.
It's a lot of reading. Yeah.
All right. So you go through law school, you graduate. Now it's time to take the bar. I've heard from many attorneys that's give people hives because not everybody passes on the first go around. So when you came time to start studying for the bar, tell me about that experience.
So I didn't really give it the attention that I should have, if I'm being honest with you. It was I moved to Baton Rouge for 3 months, and I'd never lived in Baton Rouge before. So as soon as I graduated from law school, I moved to Baton Rouge, and I never lived there before. And I thought, oh, this is a fun place, and I've got all these friends that live here that I hadn't seen in years or whatever from high school or, from Monroe. And so I'm going out and hanging out, just really partying too much, and it's just not, I didn't take it seriously enough. And so on the first shot at the bar exam, I failed. And
how humbling was that?
Oh man, that might have been worse than getting arrested as a sophomore in college. That was like, holy crap, I've never failed anything in my life. And then, this thing that I've invested all this money in, spent all this time, and I'm a failure, and it was horrible. But again, it was one of those moments where it's like you do some soul searching. I did some soul searching, and I decided, what am I going to do? Like, am I just going to abandon the idea of becoming a lawyer because of one setback? And so at that point, I decided, I'm going to, deconstruct the bar exam and reconstruct it in my head, and I'm going to freaking knock this thing out.
How long did you study before you took the next exam?
So there's 2 exams in Louisiana. There's 2 exams every year.
Okay.
The first one, or the one that people take upon graduation, is typically the July exam, and it's usually in the middle or end of July. And then the second is the February exam, and I don't remember if that's in the beginning or the end of February, to be honest with you. So I had until the February exam to prepare, and you find out it takes 3 months to get the results.
Yeah, I know how difficult
It's
and
horrible.
frustrating.
It's so frustrating. It really is.
You think with today's technology, or even back when you passed it, that technology, they would have been able to tell you much sooner than 3 months.
You would think, but you don't.
But it's still the same today, if I'm not mistaken. Still 3 months.
Yeah. So back then. And I don't know how it is now, because there's a whole group of lawyers that exist now because of COVID that never took the bar exam.
Really?
Yes, the COVID era, 2000, the July 2000, the July 2000 and
Really?
maybe
They did not have to take the bar?
and maybe the February 2020 and February 21. I'm not certain, but I know the July 2020.
No, they walk around with an asterisk next to their
No,
name?
no, they don't. They don't. They don't. And I know a couple of them, and I'm not about to say that.
Oh yeah, but kudos to them for not having to stress
good,
over it.
Good on them. You
Yeah.
know, I wish I could.
Yeah.
I wish I could have slid in like that. But I say that actually, I'm glad that I didn't, because I feel like the experience of getting knocked down was really formative in developing me as a lawyer, really, and it gave me a certain extra gear to push through. But yeah, I deconstructed the bar exam, and I rebuilt it word by word in my head, and I went in there and I passed the bar exam in the next go, which February typically has like a 40% passage rate, and I passed it in February. The year that I failed it, though, I think the passage rate was like significantly less than it had been in prior July tests. And just to give you a little bit about the bar exam is a 3-day test. Okay, it is 21 and a half hours of exam conditions.
Wow.
Total. So it's 8 hours on the first day, 8 hours on the second day. No wait, 7 and a. No wait, I'm trying to think. 16. And then like
That's intense.
7.5 on the third day. It might be, I don't know. No, it's 7 hours on the first day, 7 hours the second day, and then 7.5 hours on the third day. And you get like 15-minute breaks or something like ridiculous. There's a lunch break that may be a little longer. But
it's intense.
Yeah.
I had no idea it was that long. I knew it was an intense testing process, but I had no idea it was over 3 days. Wow. All right, so you take it in February, you get notified in what?
April.
End
of April.
And the letter comes in the mail. How long did it take you to open that letter? How long did you stare at it before you opened it? Or did you just rip right into it and say, I just got to know?
I can't remember.
I can tell you my stomach would have been in knots of trying to say.
I think at that point I knew that I nailed it.
Okay. You put that much work into it.
I just, when I walked out of there, I didn't have any doubts.
No doubts.
But I mean, I don't remember specifically the letter.
All right. You get the letter.
I remember when I opened the letter, I think when I opened the letter, I think that I know that this is going to be informing me that I passed. Like, I knew it. You know what I'm saying? So I opened it, I knew it was passed, and I went down to Geno's and I showed it to my dad and my Aunt Phyllis.
How proud was he?
Oh man. Like it was super.
How many siblings do you have?
So I don't have any siblings that live in Monroe.
Okay.
I have a older half brother that lives in Kentucky, and and she's the oldest half sister that lives also in Kentucky.
Okay.
And my mom lives in Kentucky.
So being able to share that experience with your dad and be able to see that look on his face, what did that do for you?
Well, there's been some highs and lows.
This puts you on one of the highs with him, right?
Yeah.
So you have your piece of paper. I'm sure there's a process for you guys to be sworn in or something for the court.
Mm-hmm.
And you start making millions the next day, right? Isn't that what everybody thinks, right?
That is not what happens.
But isn't that what a lot of people think? I mean, you're an attorney. You got to be rolling in it right now. All the money's coming from every different direction. But the truth be told is you have several paths that you can travel as an attorney. Did you start off in personal injury right off the bat? I know that some will start off working for a DA's office just to get some income coming in. What was your path?
So Tony Bruscato was my mentor. And so right off the bat, I just basically followed him around. You know, I mean, I followed him around for probably over a year before I really did anything like go to court or do anything in court. And then I've had other mentors along the way that have, helped me, I guess, develop, I guess my decision trees or whatever you want to however you want to call it. Help me understand, what's good, what's not good,
I think people a lot of times underrate having the value of a mentor, but the right mentor can open doors for you. The right mentor can set you on a path. It's kind of like in some cases hitting the easy button. You don't have to make all the mistakes that they made because they're going to teach you, hopefully, how not to make some of the mistakes that they had in their career. And eventually you'll find your own mistakes and you'll learn and hopefully give back to someone else. So you hung around with him for about a year. Is that when you decided to?
Well, so to give you the full, so I hung around. I basically followed him around for, 6 years, but for that first year I didn't really do anything. Okay, I had some client, and to answer your question, I went right into personal injury and workers' comp, and and I would ask him for advice and stuff, and we'd talk about cases and stuff like that. And to your point, there's a certain point where like we would talk about cases, but then he would be like, it's up to you to make the decision and
Right.
work it. You gotta decide you gotta decide how you're gonna, what needs to happen next as far as what your client does or what you do. That's gonna be ultimately what you need to do. And so I started developing, confidence through making decisions, and some of those decisions worked out really, really well, and some of them maybe didn't have the impact that I thought they would or whatever. And the idea was I just kept, get a client here or there and work that case, and then maybe another client, and then another client.
How do you deal with setbacks? Obviously, in the beginning, you probably had some setbacks that would come up because you're not going to be batting 100. I wouldn't think, or you could be batting 100.
No, I'm
But
not.
how,
No.
but
No
how
one
did you
is.
how did you deal with setbacks?
So I do what I call a post-mortem. And by that I mean, like, actually I recently tried a case, and the outcome wasn't favorable, and which isn't like, it was just it. Anyway, it happened, and there's things that you can do after that can turn it around. But I'll go analyze, either by myself or with somebody else. Okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? Could I have done this different? Could I have done this differently? How did my client's testimony come into this? Because typically if we're going to trial, the client's testifying. And what could I have done better? There's always something I could have done better. I don't care what the situation is. There's always something you can do better. Ultimately, was it a case that I should have tried, or was it a case that I should have just not even taken? And sometimes there's cases that we sign up or we represent people on that it's not good. It's not a good fact pattern. It's not a good situation. And so, and the idea is to do as little of that as possible, and to zero if possible. Right. But not at the expense of not representing somebody that is deserving and that truly needs representation and guidance.
When you how long did it take you before you started your own firm? To where you're totally independent, you have your own firm.
Mm-hmm. Day one. Yeah.
So you still relied on your uncle for advice, and I'm sure other people for advice, but day one, you're out there on your own, trying to hustle, find clients, and represent them the best way you know how.
True.
What and these are going to be some assumptions, so if they're wrong, please correct me. I'm assuming there's no boilerplate path that you can stamp on a workman's comp case or a personal injury case in an auto accident. There's not boilerplate anything. It's trying to formulate a plan based on the situation. Would that be a fair statement?
Well, yes, but there's also like checkpoints or specific events that pretty much are guaranteed to happen in every case. And we know what all those things are, but
I guess what I'm getting at is how important is it to have the right representation. You can't just, we're in the world where AI is growing at such a fast rate.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that keep coming up over and over is that the service industry is going to get hit the hardest with AI, which I don't necessarily believe. You can't have an AI to take the twists and turns that I take selling real estate on a daily basis and be able to overcome that. And I don't think from the standpoint of personal injury, you'll be able to have someone that can come up, says, hey, that this happened. We should cut you a check for this based on these things. How important is it to have that attorney that really knows what's going on, how to analyze a case?
So I think I think AI is never going to be able to replace a litigator ever. And I'm a litigator. Now AI maybe could play with title insurance, and what not what you do, but what closing attorneys do. It could play with what banking attorneys do and transactional lawyers do. It could have an effect on. I'm trying to think other areas. Contract lawyers that draft contracts. I mean, it's gonna
Task-oriented type.
Specific task-oriented things with, those, especially transactional. I got to be thinking, if I was a transactional lawyer, I'd be thinking, okay, how am I going to protect my business with this stuff? Because all that is just kind of plug and play to begin with. Not saying that there's not opinions that a title lawyer has to develop to get to because what a title lawyer is trying to do is he's trying to take this parcel that is owned by Brian and transact it to Alex and make sure that Alex pays what the contract says he's supposed to pay and that the terms of the contract are achieved through that closing process. And that's a process that will still happen. But finding out, how do we know that Brian owns this?
Yeah.
Okay. And who owned it before Brian and who owned it before him.
And who may have liens still outstanding against.
Who has a lien on it.
Yeah.
How do we make sure those liens were satisfied? Because what happens a lot, and this is where the lawyer part comes in, what happens a lot is sometimes there can be some liens or some stuff that's hanging out there that was never canceled. And like the bank has been sold or closed or whatever that initially filed that lien. And so the lawyer has to be there to either figure out how to wipe that slate clean for Alex, or he has to, make a decision, And so from that, and there's certain things that, lawyers can do in that regard that I think will probably never go away totally.
Right. But can have some impact down the road on some level. So tell me about Louisiana, depending on which website you go on, is either ranked the second highest or the highest when it comes to car insurance. The politicians seem to think that the only way to reduce our insurance cost is through some type of tort reform that's out there. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm in favor of reforms that help the citizens. But I also think that at the core of this quote unquote problem is, especially with car accident. Let's just talk about car accidents, because there's a lot more to it than just car accidents. There's stuff going on in workers' comp that to me is just like beyond the pale of not really helping the system.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, yes. I'll tell you what, let's talk about workers' comp first.
Okay.
So in the workers' comp system, you take somebody, an employee, okay, that has offered their time and efforts in the industry and blood and sweat and tears to their master, to their employer, and in that process receive some sort of injury. The employer is responsible for that.
Sure. And I believe the employer should be.
And the employer should be. Okay? And any discussion about what happens next that relieves the employer from that obligation, or an effort to relieve the employer of that obligation, in my opinion, is a travesty to all of the people that have come before and that will come after, and that will give their life or their body or their abilities to the benefit of a business person or even the state. These people, there's varying degrees of ability, okay, or disability that can develop from these injuries. And debating on whether a person is abled or disabled and the evidence that develops in those specific cases is fair game, you know?
But it also has to be hard to determine that, because how can I sit here and look at you and you look like a healthy man, but you injured your back in the worst kind of way, and I can't physically see that. But the pain is still apparent and it's there. I mean, how does that get communicated in a way to where the person who is injured can be taken care of?
So we have there's objective testing that can be done. There's multiple different ways to objectively, and when I say objective versus subjective, like say, oh, my back hurts, oh, my neck hurts, somebody can say that until their face turns blue, but there are tests that can be done that will objectively demonstrate that they have a problem in their spine or in their shoulder or in their knee or their leg or their hip or what have you. There's MRIs, there's EMG, nerve conduction study tests. There are functional capacity evaluations where a therapist will actually objectively observe an injured worker perform various tasks and activities.
But to hear the people that would chirp a lot of times, oh, there's nothing wrong with that person, they just need to get over it and come back to work.
So go. They have the right. Employers have the right to go get these tests done.
Yeah.
Go do that. If you think he's not hurt, then go do that. But don't forget how we got here.
Right.
This person was giving their life, their blood, their sweat, their tears, their time to the service of another. And that's when this happened. That was never, we're never outside of that realm.
But you're saying the advancement in medical practices, there's very objective ways that we can prove out that this claim, there's something here that needs to be addressed.
Well, you take somebody's had a 2-level lumbar fusion, okay? Should they be in a job where they're lifting 50 pounds on a regular basis? I mean, you tell me, Brian.
No, I'm with you on that.
What do you think? Do you think? No. I mean, so
because it's going to only compound future issues with someone if they continue working in that area.
Yeah. So is he supposed to give the rest of his life to that employer at that point? At what point are we talking about something beyond freedom of contract? He got hurt, and if he goes back to that job with that 2-level fusion, he's going to get hurt again and again and again. Eventually, he's going to have 16 rods up and down his spine, and he's not going to be able to lift a cup of water. What kind of quality of life is he supposed to have?
When you hit cases for workman's comp type cases, is it pretty traditional that these end up working out in settlements, or can you never tell that sometimes these cases have to be litigated?
So this is why you need. I'm about to tell you why in a workers' comp case specifically why you have to have a lawyer. I mean, like if you are in a workers' comp situation and you don't have a lawyer, like you're going down a dark path. There are all sorts of things that happen in a workers' comp situation that a claimant is not going to be familiar with because he's been working. Okay, the only thing he knows is, lifting heavy objects or whatever, and that's not a statement of superiority on my part.
Sure,
it's just a statement of fact.
Right.
I mean, people that are in industries working in like take graphic packaging for example, or Take DOTD, the state, for example, or Swanson Prison, for example. I've represented a ton of people that worked at Swanson. None of those people typically are extremely familiar with our Louisiana workers' comp statutes, what their rights are, what the employer's obligations are, and what their obligations. They have obligations too. Let's take an analogy. What do you think the most important right a criminal defendant has? Switching gears.
The right to counsel, a right to remain silent.
Bingo. That's the biggest right you have in a criminal matter. Right to remain silent. Okay, and you don't have to answer questions that would tend to incriminate you. All right. I think that's the Fifth Amendment. I don't do a lot of criminal work, but and that's the most important thing in a criminal case. In a workers' comp case, you actually don't have the right to remain silent. It's a civil matter. You can be called to testify. So as a matter of fact, you're probably it turns into a denied claim, there's a very good chance that you're gonna testify. And so that's for that reason alone, you should have a lawyer from day one.
Right. So if someone gets hurt on the job, I know many places you get hurt on the job, they're going to send you to get drug tested immediately. And they're going to start, HR is going to probably start asking you a whole bunch of questions. At what point do you think if someone got hurt on the job, at what point do they need to reach out for representation?
Well, I would say at the point that they realize that they've got an injury that is going to prevent them from returning to work. I would say at that point they need a lawyer. So if they tried to go back to work the next day or whatever and just couldn't do it or had to go back to the doctor, I'd say at that point you really should just go ahead and get a lawyer, because there's what comes next is all about what's in the employer's best interest.
Right.
And that means like you're about to get an HR meeting. We needed to talk about, a lot of businesses are afraid to let their carrier know that they've got an injured worker, so they'll try to pay out of pocket for some of the initial stuff.
Right.
And that ends up, in my experience, that ends up getting everything all convoluted and off kilter.
So if someone is in need of a workman's comp attorney, there's billboards everywhere advertising people who may not even live here to people who have been in this community for years. What should someone look for when hiring a workman's comp attorney?
I would ask them if they've ever had a workers' compensation case that went to trial and went to appeal, and that they appealed or that they opposed the appeal.
Would it be safe to say that not all attorneys are created equal?
I'm not trying to put anybody down.
And I'm not either, but if your mainstay of business is working offshore accidents and strictly offshore accidents, and that's all you ever do, is that the best place for someone to go? I know in my profession that just because I have a license doesn't mean that I can be great at this or this or this. Mm-hmm. It may mean I'm only great in this one area because it's the area I choose to focus on. Are there any other questions other than that they need to ask?
I think that this answers it. I think, have you been involved in a case that went to trial and that went to appeal? If the answer is no, then I would, if it was me personally, if I wasn't a lawyer that handles workers' comp cases, but me personally, if I'm looking for a lawyer for my workers' comp case and I'm the first guy I talk to or lady that I talk to, have you been involved in trying a workers' comp case and an appeal dealing with that workers' comp case? Even if it's just one time,
yeah,
I'm going to say I feel comfortable with that person's capability, whether they won or lost.
And how much does it, if it was just you specific, how much would it cost somebody just to have a call with you to see if y'all would be the right fit?
That's all. With pretty much everybody that does personal injury and workers' comp, we'll talk to you, and we'll give you a meeting sometimes more than one meeting, and to tell you what we think about your case. I'll tell you what I think about your case, and what I think I could do in that case, or what my recommendations would be. I may even, and I'm pretty open. I mean, if sometimes people want to, like, they're not sure, they're like afraid to sue their employer, or they're afraid to file a suit against somebody that caused a car accident, like, because they don't want to be the suing type.
Sure.
But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a victim in something and you have a real loss because of the situation you find yourself in, lots of times you should get somebody that's objective, because that objectivity lends me into one direction and one direction only, and that's to my client's benefit, versus like, well, I don't want to be too mean or what. Like, that's not a part of my calculation.
So this is not you personally attacking someone else. It's that I'm here to represent you to make sure you get the compensation you need for the injuries that you have.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily a fight per se.
Right.
It's just a presentation of choices that have consequences.
Now let's talk about an auto accident, whether you hit someone or you got hit in an auto accident. I personally, myself, I was involved in one many, many years ago.
Wait, when was this?
Many years ago.
Wait, hold on a second.
I think I was on North 5th. It was one of the one-way streets in the Garden District. And
I hope you weren't terribly injured in that.
I was not. I had my daughter in the car with me, and got sideswiped. Somebody ran a stop sign. Everything was cordial at that point. Other driver got a ticket. And I felt fine. Nothing was wrong until the next morning. And then, I just felt extremely stiff. So I go to the chiropractor. I just work it out. Felt better to me. And I didn't reach out to any insurance company for anything other than to get my vehicle fixed. But the insurance company just ended up writing me a check for they said, we'll cover the medical bills. And I'm going to give you an additional check if you'll just sign this piece of paper saying that you're not going to sue me or come after me. How common is that?
It's probably fairly common. People along certain demographic bands, people that work for a living, they typically are hesitant to pursue a claim unless there is some devastating injury. And that's what a lot of my clients are. Working people, like most of my clients work. Like, I have very few clients that are on like Social Security disability or, government assistance or any of that stuff. Most of my clients, they work for a living, and they've come into an incident that sincerely prevents them from being able to perform that work, at least at the level they once could.
When it comes to injury in an auto accident, what do you advise people as far as information to be able to give out to law enforcement or when insurance companies call them? What kind of advice do you try to give at that point?
Well, typically in a car accident, the first obligation for the at-fault carrier is to address the property damage. And, 50-50 if they actually do what they're supposed to do with a person that's unrepresented. And then if they do start the adjusting process where they evaluate the damage to the vehicle, then it's a question of whether or not they appropriately value the damage.
Right.
And sometimes, it's weird. Sometimes adjusters will try to total a vehicle out whenever it's really not totaled. Or it may not be totaled, or maybe the victim of the accident doesn't want it to be totaled because they've got a note on it that's more than the value of the vehicle. Right. And that happens
a lot. Yeah, I can imagine.
That's actually the unfortunate part of those property damage claims. Like sometimes, like I had a girl I was representing earlier this year. She had a $20,000 car that had a $30,000 note, and it's like, is it totaled? I hope it's not totaled because it needs to be back.
Yeah.
She's better off if she can keep paying that note.
Correct.
Because now she's going to have to roll that $10,000 note into something else.
Right.
Or come up with $10,000 or or get sued or file bankruptcy,
which is never good.
which is not good.
Um, so talking about car crashes, tell me the story of what happened to your wrapped vehicle. I think that's kind of how. So I just, truth be told, here, clear the air. So my wife was driving through the that area and saw the vehicle. Was it a car or SUV?
So my Suburban.
Okay, yeah.
I've got a
So-
Suburban and I've got a van.
So one of the vehicles had been damaged, and you could tell very apparent it was in an accident. And your name and everything's plastered on it, and we're sitting back thinking, man, I would hate to be the individual that ran into an attorney's car, but come to find out, it was something a little bit different. It wasn't a normal, accident. It involved a 18-wheeler. Is that correct?
It was a commercial van. Actually.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to say the name of the company.
Sure. But what happened in that case?
I had a mediation scheduled for that day. Mediation is like where opposing lawyers get together, and there's a neutral third-party lawyer comes in, and he tries to hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And he's trying to get everybody to come together.
Find common ground.
And kumbaya, and let's go home. And so I had a in-person mediation at my office, and I go in our break room, and we don't have any water, we don't have any stuff, and I asked one of my assistants, I said, why don't you run to the store, pick up some waters, pick up some cookies, pick up some little snacks or whatever, and I gave her my credit card. And so I think she went to Super One or Brookshire's, or I don't really know exactly where she went. And on her way back, she's westbound on Louisville Avenue. And one of the sides, I think it was 7th Street, there's a van that's trying to turn, that's southbound on 7th, but it's trying to turn left or eastbound on Louisville. So she's going west on Louisville, it's trying to come that way. And so it just pulls out in front of her. And I mean, she had no time to stop or do anything.
I can imagine the person's heart when they saw your name on the side of that vehicle.
I'm not trying to make it any worse for that individual than
I know.
it has to be.
Just,
you know what I mean?
But it's just one of those ironic things that kind of happens. But it goes to show that it can happen to anybody at any time. You could be the best driver in the world and get caught up in someone else's mishap or recklessness that could happen at that point.
Going back to the tort reform stuff, though, here's what I would say to all of our legislators and to the public about this. It's all theoretical until it's you that's involved in it. And I'm involved in these things from the standpoint where I'm representing, a bunch of people with these types of claims. And I can't make sense of it being any worse than it has to be for these people as it is, okay? What the legislature's really trying to accomplish is trying to get insurance companies to lower the rates, okay? But we shouldn't be trying to relieve bad actors from their obligations in the situations that they negligently cause.
Right.
I mean, I'm not trying to point the finger at any individual, okay? But I see these medical transportation companies out there a lot. And I remember in the last tort reform, we've been talking about tort reform for 50 years.
Right.
I mean, it's not like this just came up yesterday.
That's correct.
And like we're talking about Louisiana is the worst or whatever. I'm not so sure that's accurate information as far as the cost of premiums. I mean, Arkansas might be less expensive because things cost less than Arkansas,
Right.
But I'm not so sure that in Dallas, Texas is less expensive than Ruston, Louisiana. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So,
and I do agree with you that I would never want to see someone who has been injured, whether it be at work or whether in their auto, and their quality of life has to suffer for the rest of their life because of someone else's negligence or just pure accident. it still happened. It still affected that individual, and I'd hate to see that individual not be able to have every comfort of life that they had before the accident by someone saying, "I'm just going to cap you at X number of dollars. You're not worth any more than that." And in fact, on some of these, I've had friends that have been injured in the past, and to hear what their settlement was at that point, I'm like, how can you live? How can you help put your kids through college? Because you're not working anymore with that kind of money. It's like, well, this is the best I could get. And it kind of saddens me.
So the comfort thing, I agree with you, but even bigger than the comfort thing is whenever you take an able-bodied man, okay, that works with his body, not at a desk or whatever, that lifts things, that has to push and pull things or turn a wrench, okay, and you take him out of his abilities because of somebody else's negligence, you tell me which legislature wants to take that away from him. I mean, that is horrible. That man should not be able to, if he's not able to return to those positions, I mean, he should be compensated.
Yeah,
and we shouldn't just barely compensate him just enough. I mean, this is a situation he did not cause and he did not ask for. I mean, he should be compensated over and beyond what the minimum is. I mean, it shouldn't be like a bargain for the insurance company or the bad actor to get out of this. Like, oh, we got a good deal. Like he accepted our $25,000 offer.
Another assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that most of your clients, you're meeting them at some of their worst moments in their life. I'm sure they have a lot of stress that's weighing on them because of the position that they're in. And it can become personal for you because it's emotional getting involved, trying to listen to someone's story. It's hard not to be pulled in on a personal level. How do you balance, because you still have a business you have to run also, how do you balance not getting pulled in too deep to where you lose your objectivity on how to, emotionally, it's hard to get pulled in on something. It's hard not to get pulled in, I guess what I meant to say, into someone's situation, because it's at a lot of cases, their worst moment. How do you balance that?
Well, I don't like resist that. And I'm thinking of a couple of clients that I have right now who are in horrible situations. And it's like, feeling the pain that they're in and, seeing what the situation they're in. Like I've got a client right now that he's got a child on the way, and he can't work. Legitimate. Like, I don't care. Like, he really can't work. There's no question about it. And his wife's pregnant. And he comes to my office. He's in his late 20s, maybe early 30s. I can't recall exactly his age, but he's young. And he limps into my office and sits down and talks. And I've seen him crying in my office, trying to figure out what to do. And I think about him and I think, I'm not going to let that guy down. I'm going to do everything we got to do. I use it. I use how I feel about that situation to make sure that we do everything we can do. Because I don't want to let him down. I want to let his wife down. And I don't want his marriage to fail because of this,
And I imagine the stress on him is just huge right now. In these situations, when you have to start litigating things, it's not over and done in a week. We're talking weeks, and I would assume sometimes years before you can get some resolution to a situation. How do you coax them through knowing that he's not able to work, and we may not be able to get him any relief for months?
That's honestly, that's
how do you prepare them for that?
That's the game plan of some of these employers and insurance companies, is they just delay, and then they try to settle at the very end for a reduced amount, and then the claimants are sometimes willing to take those settlements
because they feel like they have no other choice
because they're desperate. And so what I tell my clients coming into this, I said that's what that this could happen in this case, and if this happens, you need to be ready. You need to be ready to go through this pain. You need to find some support with your family or with your other relatives or your friends even to get through this. It's going to take, it can take a year to get through this. And if it gets appealed, then we're looking at, maybe 18 months to 2 years. And so there's no easy button, unfortunately.
Right.
And like I said, anybody in a workers' comp situation, from the day that they begin to feel like they're unable to return to work, I mean, they're playing with a lot of risk, not having a lawyer.
Right.
Anybody that's ever going to have to give a recorded statement or testify that doesn't have a lawyer, that has something at stake, I mean, you're risking a lot by not having legal counsel. And I'm not saying come hire me.
Right.
I'm saying
you need representation.
You need representation if you're going to have to speak, period.
Where do you see your firm going? Do you see growth in your firm? Do you look at maybe trying to expand? I heard you mention Ruston. Do you you have a satellite office in Ruston?
We do. We just opened an office in Ruston,
okay,
as a matter of fact.
Do you see yourself bringing on other attorneys down the road?
And so we have there's a lawyer that works with me now that's a full-time lawyer. His name's Michael Mahaffey.
Okay.
He went to Tech. He would say, "Go Dogs."
So I actually played middle school football with Michael Mahaffey.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I haven't connected with him in years, but yeah, I know Michael.
So Michael's working with me.
Yeah, awesome.
And then I have another lawyer that works with me too, but it's really more part-time. Ed Patton is his name. And absolutely, I want to try to help as many people as I can, as competently and as well as I can, and looking after their best interest individually. That's ultimately the goal of my law firm.
So I know you have, and we haven't really talked much or any about it. I know you've got 3 kids. I'm assuming they're younger. What kind of legacy do you want to leave for them? What do you want? What do you want to instill through your business, your community activities? What do you want your legacy to be known for?
That's a heavy question.
It is.
Yeah. I think I would want my children, and hopefully one day I'll have some grandchildren. I would want them to say that I was a hardworking man, that I took care of people that I should have taken care of, and that I loved them, and that the places that I went and the spaces that I occupied were better when I left them than when I got there.
Fantastic. Isn't that all a dad could really ask for with his kids? And the reason I asked that question, because, I'm sitting here thinking about Geno's and the legacy to the community that it's led is that we're gonna offer you the best that we have, and we're gonna withstand no matter what the economy has. It's going to be there. It's a staple in this community, and I feel that any business professional in our space, we have an obligation to our community, to our family. And for me, and I'm glad to hear you say that, you want to leave it better than what you found it. And I think that's what, our economy here in Monroe, Louisiana, West Monroe, Ouachita Parish, is built on the back of small businesses. We don't have big industry here that employs half the town. And it's small business people like yourself that keeps this economy going. And it's really nice to know that we have ethical people that believe in community, believe in a reputation, and want to do good by the people they serve. So, John, I really appreciate you coming in. Thanks for reaching out, and we're going to have to do this again.
I would love to do it again. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
wish you guys the best. And if there's anything we can do for you, let us know.
All right, man. Cool deal.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this podcast. We really appreciate your involvement. Please leave us a comment, or even better yet, subscribe to this podcast and hit that notification bell so that you can be alerted for every new episode when it hits.